We all have moments when emotions take over, when anger flares, frustration builds, or stress overwhelms. And in those moments, we react. But what if we could shift from reacting to responding? What if we could take control of our emotions rather than letting them control us? The difference between reacting and responding is the difference between regret and resolve, between chaos and clarity. Today, we're going to uncover the secret to emotional control, the key to making better decisions, strengthening relationships, and leading with confidence. A reaction is immediate. It happens without thought, without consideration, without strategy. It is our brain's way of protecting us, ensuring survival in moments of perceived danger. When we touch something hot, we pull our hand away before we even process the pain. When someone startles us, we jump before we recognize there's no real threat. This is how we are wired. Our nervous system is designed for speed, for instinct, for survival. But while reactions serve us well in moments of physical danger, they often work against us in everyday situations. In a conversation, a reaction might look like interrupting before fully listening. In an argument, it might be raising our voice before we understand the full picture. In leadership, it might mean making a decision under pressure that we later regret. Reactions are raw, emotional, and unfiltered. They come from the most primitive part of our brain, the amygdala, where the sole purpose is to defend, to fight, to flee, or to freeze. A response, on the other hand, is different. A response requires thought. It demands that we pause, consider, and choose the best course of action rather than defaulting to an emotional impulse. A response is not dictated by the past, by old habits, or by conditioned reflexes. It is intentional, shaped by awareness, and guided by purpose. It takes into account the long-term impact rather than just the immediate feeling. Where reactions escalate conflict, responses de-escalate it. Where reactions are rooted in emotion, responses are rooted in wisdom. A response is the product of self-awareness, of emotional intelligence, of the ability to step outside the heat of the moment and assess the bigger picture. It is what allows leaders to inspire rather than intimidate. It is what allows relationships to grow rather than break. It is what enables us to navigate challenges with clarity rather than chaos. In every interaction, every challenge, every emotionally charged moment, there is a split second where we have a choice. But most of the time, we don't even recognize it. We are conditioned to react immediately, to defend when criticized, to retaliate when hurt, to lash out when frustrated. Our emotions surge, and before we know it, words have left our mouths, actions have been set in motion, and consequences have been created that we cannot take back. But what if we could change that? What if, in that critical moment, we could insert a pause, a tiny break between what happens to us and how we respond? That pause is the most powerful tool we have for emotional control. It is the moment where we take back ownership of our actions, where we separate impulse from intention, where we allow our rational mind to step in before our emotional mind takes over. In that space, we regain control. We shift from being ruled by our emotions to being guided by our values. Instead of snapping back at someone who upsets us, we have the chance to consider what they might be going through. Instead of making a rash decision out of frustration, we give ourselves time to think about the long-term consequences. Instead of letting stress dictate our actions, we take a moment to realign with our goals. That pause is where wisdom begins. It is where leadership is strengthened. It is where relationships are protected. It is the difference between saying something we regret and saying something that builds trust. It is the difference between reacting out of fear and responding with purpose. It is the space where we reclaim our ability to choose how we show up in the world. Emotional intelligence is often described as the ability to manage our emotions and navigate social complexities, but at its core, it begins with a single fundamental skill: self-awareness. Without self-awareness, there is no emotional intelligence. Because we cannot manage what we do not recognize, we cannot regulate what we do not understand, and we cannot improve what we do not acknowledge. Self-awareness is the ability to step outside of ourselves and observe not just what we do, but why we do it. It is the practice of noticing our emotions as they arise, recognizing the patterns in our reactions, and understanding the triggers that set them off. It is the ability to identify not only what we are feeling, but also what those feelings mean, where they come from, and how they influence our decisions, our actions, and our relationships. Without self-awareness, we move through life on autopilot, driven by habits and impulses rather than by conscious choice. We react instead of respond. We make decisions based on fleeting emotions rather than on long-term wisdom. We get caught in the same conflicts, the same frustrations, the same struggles, without ever realizing that the common denominator in all of them is us. When we lack self-awareness, we misinterpret situations. We assume intentions that may not be there. We project our own fears, insecurities, and unresolved emotions onto others. We take things personally that have nothing to do with us. We become defensive without understanding why. We struggle to change because we don't see the patterns that need changing in the first place. But when we cultivate self-awareness, everything shifts. We begin to notice the way our emotions fluctuate throughout the day. We catch ourselves in moments of stress or frustration and recognize what's really driving them. We identify the recurring triggers that set us off and learn how to manage them before they control us. We start to see the gap between stimulus and response, the space where we have the power to choose a different outcome. Self-awareness is not just about recognizing our emotions. It is about understanding how those emotions affect others. It is realizing that the frustration we bring into a meeting affects the tone of the entire discussion. It is recognizing that the stress we carry home from work impacts the way we engage with our family. It is seeing the way our words and actions ripple outward, shaping the environment and relationships around us. The more self-aware we become, the more intentional we can be. We develop the ability to regulate our emotions not by suppressing them, but by understanding them. We learn to differentiate between feelings that require action and feelings that simply need to be acknowledged and let go. We become more adaptable, more resilient, and more capable of handling difficult situations with clarity and composure. Great leaders and successful people are not the ones who never face challenges, never encounter difficult people, or never experience moments of frustration. They are not immune to setbacks, failures, or emotional triggers. What sets them apart is not the absence of these struggles, but their ability to navigate them with intention, clarity, and composure. They have mastered the art of responding rather than reacting, and in doing so, they create environments of trust, stability, and progress. In high-pressure situations, most people default to their instincts. They let frustration dictate their tone, urgency override their patience, and fear cloud their judgment. But great leaders and high achievers operate differently. They understand that reacting impulsively may provide temporary relief, but it often leads to long-term consequences. They know that a rash email, a hasty decision, or a heated argument can undo months or even years of effort. Instead, they pause. They assess. They take a moment to step outside the immediate emotion and ask themselves, what is the best response for the outcome I want? This ability to respond with intention is not about suppressing emotion. It is not about becoming robotic, detached, or indifferent. In fact, the most successful people are deeply in tune with their emotions, but they do not let those emotions dictate their actions. Instead, they use them as information, as signals that guide their decisions rather than control them. They recognize that anger, frustration, and even fear have a purpose, but they refuse to let those emotions become the driving force behind their leadership, their relationships, or their success. When conflicts arise, great leaders do not escalate them, they de-escalate. When a team member makes a mistake, they do not lash out, they seek to understand. When unexpected challenges arise, they do not panic, they adapt. Their responses are measured, thoughtful, and aligned with their values and long-term vision. They are not driven by ego or the need to prove a point. They are driven by the bigger picture. Successful people also understand the power of emotional contagion. They recognize that their response does not just affect them, it sets the tone for everyone around them. In a moment of crisis, a leader who stays calm instills confidence in their team. A professional who responds to criticism with grace earns respect. An entrepreneur who remains composed in the face of setbacks fosters resilience in their organization. Their ability to respond rather than react becomes a model for those around them, creating a culture of stability rather than volatility. The mastery of responding over reacting is what allows leaders to build trust. People follow those they trust, and trust is built on consistency, predictability, and emotional intelligence. No one wants to follow a leader who is unpredictable, whose mood dictates their decisions, or who lashes out when under pressure. But when someone demonstrates the ability to respond with wisdom, even in difficult situations, they become a source of stability. People look to them not just for direction, but for reassurance. Their presence itself becomes an anchor. Beyond leadership, this skill is a defining factor in personal success. The most accomplished individuals, whether in business, sports, or the arts, understand that their ability to stay composed in critical moments determines their long-term results. An athlete who loses focus after a bad call lets the game slip away. A negotiator who reacts emotionally to a tough conversation loses leverage. A business owner who makes decisions based on fear rather than strategy risks derailing everything they have built. Responding with clarity and purpose is what separates those who succeed from those who struggle to sustain their progress. This mastery does not happen by accident. It is not something people are born with. It is something they develop through practice, self-awareness, and discipline. It is a skill refined over time, through reflection, through learning from past mistakes, and through the conscious decision to choose response over reaction, no matter how difficult the moment. Perspective is the lens through which we interpret the world. It shapes our understanding of events, influences our emotions, and determines how we respond to challenges, conflicts, and uncertainties. When we react impulsively, it is often because we are stuck in a narrow perspective, one dominated by immediate emotions, personal biases, and a limited view of the situation. But when we step back and shift our perspective, we gain the clarity to respond with intention rather than impulse. The secret to responding lies in our ability to see beyond the moment. In the heat of an argument, the natural reaction is to defend, to retaliate, to prove a point. But if we take a step back and consider the broader perspective, we might recognize that the argument is not about winning, it's about understanding. We might realize that the person challenging us is not attacking us, but expressing their own frustration or insecurity. We might see that our words, if chosen carefully, have the power to either escalate or defuse the situation. Perspective allows us to ask, is this worth my energy? What outcome do I truly want? How do I respond in a way that aligns with my values rather than my emotions in this moment? Successful people and great leaders develop the habit of expanding their perspective before responding. They understand that the way a situation appears in the moment is rarely the full story. When faced with criticism, they do not react defensively, they consider the possibility that there might be truth in the feedback. When confronted with an obstacle, they do not see it as a roadblock, they reframe it as an opportunity for growth. When dealing with difficult people, they do not take things personally. They recognize that other people's behaviors are often a reflection of their own struggles rather than a direct attack. Perspective also helps us differentiate between what matters now and what matters in the long run. Many of the things we react to in the moment, minor inconveniences, misunderstandings, perceived slights, become insignificant when viewed from a broader timeline. In 5 days, 5 months, or 5 years, will this moment still matter? If the answer is no, then why allow it to dictate our emotions and decisions? When we train ourselves to think long-term, we naturally become more measured in our responses. We prioritize relationships over ego, growth over comfort, and progress over fleeting emotions. The ability to shift perspective is also the key to resilience. When we face setbacks, a reactive mindset sees failure as final, as a reflection of our inadequacy. But a responsive mindset sees setbacks as feedback, as lessons that move us closer to success. Perspective allows us to reframe challenges not as personal defeats, but as stepping stones toward improvement. The same event that causes one person to give up can be the very thing that propels another person forward. simply because of how they choose to see it. Expanding our perspective also means considering how our responses affect those around us. The way we handle frustration, stress, or disappointment does not just impact us, it influences the people we lead, the culture we create, and the relationships we build. A leader who reacts impulsively fosters an environment of fear and uncertainty. A leader who responds with patience and understanding cultivates trust and stability. When we broaden our view to see beyond our immediate feelings and consider the ripple effect of our actions, we make better choices, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us. The shift from reacting to responding is ultimately a shift in perspective. It is the ability to see situations not just from where we stand, but from multiple angles. It is the practice of zooming out before making decisions, of considering different viewpoints, of recognizing that every situation carries more depth than what appears on the surface. It is understanding that how we choose to see the world determines how we navigate it. The difference between reacting and responding is the difference between being controlled by our emotions and using them as a tool for growth. It is the difference between making impulsive decisions that we later regret and choosing actions that align with our values and long-term vision. Emotional control is not about suppressing what we feel, it is about creating space between emotion and action. It is about recognizing that a pause, however brief, can be the most powerful tool we have. It is about developing the self-awareness to understand our triggers, the discipline to shift our perspective, and the wisdom to respond in a way that fosters trust, growth, and success. The most effective leaders, the most resilient individuals, the most successful people are not those who never experience frustration, stress, or fear. They are those who have learned to navigate those emotions with intention. They do not let temporary emotions dictate permanent outcomes. They do not let fleeting impulses define their character, and neither should we. Every day, we are presented with moments where we can choose to react or to respond. In conversations, in conflicts, in moments of challenge or uncertainty, we have the power to decide how we show up. The question is, will we let emotions drive us, or will we take control, pause, and respond with purpose?